All right, welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. I'm your host, James Silvis, and we are going to go into how to create breakthrough conversations today. Oftentimes, I get reached out to by leaders of organizations and teams on how do I get this idea to my team? Like they're not grasping it, they're not understanding it. How do I help them understand X, Y, and Z, right? And I would consider that a breakthrough. Breakthrough is something that you didn't see before that now you see, and because you see it has changed maybe everything or a lot of things and help you and or the person that you're communicating with operate at a new level, right? And so I wanted to share 7 tools that I use regularly over the last 12 years of doing business in very vast environments, whether it's Fortune 500 companies, high-level elite sports programs, high school, collegiate, semi-professional, whether it's in intimate relationships, a marriage, or a long-lasting relationship of family. These tools hold true in all of those scenarios. They have been battle-tested. They have proven to be extremely effective, which is why I continue to use them, right? And as I go through each of these, you may resonate with one more than the other. So by no means is this a sequential order thing. It's more so, what is the moment calling for, and what tool can you pull out that can create some sort of breakthrough for you and for them in that situation, right? So this episode is coming from the perspective of the listener being the coach, you, the listener, being a coach, a leader, a manager, and I'm distilling basically the last 12 years of my career into this episode, right? So there are definitely more tools than this to use. These are just 7 really highly effective ones that I use regularly, so they were easy kind of for me to put together. Going into any sort of hard conversation, conflict-rich conversation, emotionally charged conversation, I think for me, I'll start with kind of my thought process before I even enter that conversation. There is a belief that I operate from. This comes from Carl Rogers, who had a fundamental belief that all humans are intrinsically good and have an innate drive within them to realize their full potential and to strive for personal growth, right? I believe that that's what people want, right? I also believe that people are inherently good, like just to their core. And whether they do things that the world seems cruel or unjust, there's a reason for that. And I'm not here to say if it's good or bad. I'm here to say, here's what happened. How did it happen? Why did it happen? And so I come at it from a more curiosity approach than anything. And, this is not tied to extreme violence or extreme things that happen all around the world. This is more so in the intimate, personal dynamics of a marriage or family or inside the companies. And when we start getting into political thoughts and all those, I mean, that sounds like a different conversation. Some of these tools can be useful there for sure, but this lens is more so from the day-to-day personal, intimate side and then the professional side. So for me, I love creating unlock moments. And in order for me to do that, I have to enter a conversation with curiosity, right? My whole goal is to understand, to clarify, and then to challenge. And I can't challenge if I don't understand it. And definitely not going to understand it if I can't articulate it back to them in a clear way that they're like, yep, that's what I mean. Right? So it's a very collaborative kind of energy that I operate from. I also see each moment as a one-of-one conversation. That although this conversation I'm having right now with you or with anyone else might be something that I've similar to what I've had before, but I'm not the exact same that I was the last time we had a similar conversation like this. There's more nuance, there's more context. The person across from me may be completely different, right? And so I like to think of this moment as a one-of-one moment, and that in and of itself creates a level of sacredness that pulls out of me more presence, more attention, more focus, right? So I'm also, as I'm listening to the person, I'm asking myself why they use the words that they use, right? What's the story that's attached to those words? This helps me know where to pull threads, helps me, know where to bring up opportunities to go deeper. And so this is kind of the back history of how my thought process is moving into a conversation and how I think about it in the beginning. So all breakthrough conversations are about shifting three things. We're shifting energy, right? We're noticing the energy that they have and then maybe infusing energy into the conversation so that it can be sustained long-term and to raise usually the energy of the situation. We're shifting perspective, right? And there was a very cool concept that a ex-CIA operative used in an interview that I heard with him and Tom Bilyeu, and I'm drawing a blank on his name. But he talked about this idea of perception versus perspective, and that most people have perception. It's their own way of viewing the world, right? They see it their way. They have their own thoughts, their own beliefs, their own ideas, and that's what guides their awareness and their focus to whatever they pay attention to. And then as the individual enhances their perspective through living life, they can see the same situation from multiple vantage points, right? And so typically in a conversation that is hard to have, there's a perception on either side of what might be right or what might be possible or not possible. And it's in that perspective that one can zoom out and see other alternatives that then creates the space for things to be moved, right? So we're shifting energy, perspective, and also trust. Trust in you as the coach or the leader. Trust that you can hold the tension, that you can hold the conflict. There's a level of trust that they might need to have in themselves that you can, hold for them or help them realize, and ultimately trust that change can happen based on what they know of you, what they've seen you do, the back history of you, or just the energy that you're bringing into the conversation. So being aware of these three things: what energy am I coming into the conversation with? What perspective am I offering through understanding their perception? And then where's the trust level, right? Sometimes it's instant based on your credibility. Other times it may take, halfway through the conversation. There are ways to speed that up per se, but that is very contextual depending on who the person in front of you is and what their back history might be and what the dynamics of the conversation are. But we're shifting those three things regardless. And so let's get into some of the tools that we can use in these types of conversations that can be very, very helpful moving forward. So the first one is changing the frame, right? Everybody has a frame in which they operate from. We can use this as a belief system, a way of representing the world that they see around them and assigning some sort of meaning that they then live in. And that dictates the behaviors, the future thoughts, the feelings, the emotions that they might have. And so I'll start with a little example. There's a parable about six blind men and an elephant. And an elephant enters the city, and these blind men have never been exposed to an elephant, so they all gather around it, and they're all touching different parts. One's touching the tail, one's touching the leg, one's touching the side of the stomach, the other touching the tusk. And this old man walks by these six blind men and is hearing a whole bunch of arguing going on, like people going back and forth. An elephant is like a snake, it's long and it's around. I can put my hand around it. The other person's like, no, it's like a wall. And the other person's like, no, it's sharp. And he's hearing this man walking by. He's hearing all of them just argue. And the old man goes, what's going on? And one of the men says, we're just trying to figure out what an elephant is, and we can't seem to agree on what it is. And he goes, well, that's because you're all touching different parts. You're all touching an elephant. You're just in different parts of the elephant. So, and bringing that to their awareness, they began to communicate with each other in a way of piecing together what that elephant was, right? And this is what a conversation is like maybe every conversation that we have, there are blind spots that we can't see, don't know, choose not to look at, that affect our understanding in someone else, right? And so if we want to change the frame in which someone is operating from, maybe it's a more disempowering frame, and we want to get them into a more empowering frame, we can do this by asking different questions, right? You can, instead of asking, what's wrong, we can say, what's missing? Or what would this look like if it worked in its ideal situation, right? We can get people out of their stuck thinking by asking a different question, one that doesn't necessarily bring up, negative or heavy thought process, but more expansive ideology. We can reframe this stuck thinking, right? We can help people see the problem from another angle. If we zoomed out 5 years from now, how important would this still feel? Is a question that we can ask. Well, it probably wouldn't be that important. Okay, then why are we spending so much time on it? And it's kind of can get to this idea of, what's right versus who's right. A lot of the time, people compete for which frame should be the one that either should operate in, and that could be a battle of who's right. My idea is right because I have evidence. My idea is right because I have evidence, and then you never get that collaborative spirit, right? And so what's right might be something that is a more collaborative approach that has not yet been thought about, but because both parties want to work together to find what that solution is, then they put their collective genius together to find a way moving forward. And that is like defining terms so that everyone can get on the same page. And this is where the curiosity comes in. I got to understand someone's frame before I even have the shot of changing it. I got to understand what part of the elephant they're touching so that I can understand their reality. Until then, we're just going to be shooting at dark and hoping that it hits something, right? So by understanding the frame, we then have higher likelihood of shifting the frame, not because we think we know what's the right thing is, right? But we're listening so well that it naturally brings about the right answer from a non-ego perspective. It's like, well, you're telling me this. Does it sound like this would be the next step? Yes, cool. Then there's a checking in along the way that then gets the person from current frame to more empowering frame. And that frame controls the focus. And the focus controls your feelings, and the feelings dictate your action. Right? So what is the frame that that person is operating in that is keeping them stuck or keeping them in a reality that they don't want? And how can we understand that to the level of depth before offering ways to move out of it, reframe it, shift into something different? Okay. Number 2, name what's in the room. What does this mean? So you're in a conversation, maybe this is a small group, and you notice that people are circling the topic. No one's really being direct. Everyone's kind of, just speaking very vague. And one of the things that you can do in that moment is, it seems like we're circling around this point. I'd like for us to come back to what the actual question is, which is this, right? Or I'm noticing that when I shared this idea, your posture shifted and it seemed that there wasn't much of an agreement there. So I just wanted to pause and see, is that accurate? What is that? What's going on? Right? And by bringing up this level of observation, it shows to the other person that you're, 1, present, 2, that you care enough to want to see if it's a thing, and 3, because you do that, it brings more clarity in how each person can then operate in that conversation moving forward. And it sharpens the communication effectiveness in that particular situation. It also invites vulnerability, right? If you ask a question and you notice that it feels like they're holding back, you can say, hey, it's okay for this process to feel hard and messy. And you may not have the right words, or you may say them and you're like, gosh, dang it, I didn't want to say that. That's fine. What's the hardest part of this for you to say out loud right now? And creating those invitations for them to go deeper. But you can't do that unless you acknowledge what you're observing, right? And you might bring up something that you think is there and it's nothing. They might say, no, that I was just stretching, and whether they're telling the truth or not, I mean, we won't ever really know, but at least you can have the opportunity to bring it up and see where that goes, right? And so these breakthroughs can often happen when people feel safe enough to do so. And if I'm holding my own safety and operating from curiosity and questioning with a level of like invitation, then that does naturally create more of that openness for them to be real, for you to gather more data, and for the conversation to move in a certain direction. Number 3, anchor to shared values, purpose, data, or something meaningful. Right? Anchor to one of those. Oftentimes in conversations, there are derailing moments. Maybe that's intentional, maybe it's not intentional, but somehow the conversation can drift into something that wasn't the original topic. And sometimes that's fine, right? But other times there is a very clear agenda that you want to follow because of X, Y, and Z. And so it's helpful to reinstate what the purpose or the mission or the value is of this conversation. And it helps to, at the beginning of the conversation, to state this so that you can anchor back to it somewhere in the middle or towards the end. But even if you don't, you can still bring this to their awareness. Hey, the original thing why we had this conversation is for us to get closer. And I really would like to talk about that. So can we refocus on how can we strengthen our communication or our connection? Right? Or you can even tie who they are or how you want that conversation to go to a value. Hey, you told me that you want to be growth oriented, that you care deeply about that. Is that still true? Well, yeah. Okay, cool. Then we're going to talk about some things that are growth focused that may be a bit uncomfortable, but it's with the whole purpose of getting better. Right? I'm tying content to something that's of value or of meaning to the individual, which makes their likelihood of wanting to listen and my likelihood of delivering something that they want increase, right? And that increases the engagement. And when you have two people engaged, that's the ideal form of communication, not one chasing the other or both just kind of treating it as a formality, just crossing things off the list, because that's definitely not going to create a breakthrough. And so this tie back to a shared value or purpose can take ego, right? Or positions inside of an organization out of the equation or lessen it and bring more alignment to the overall bigger meaning. You know, it's less about what you think, what I think. I think the purpose is, you know, we're focusing on this goal. The goal is fill in the blank, and I'm not sure that we're there yet. So can we keep focusing on this? Let me see if I have anything else there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It also helps if you know the values of the person that you're communicating with, because you can do your best to correlate your message to their values so that the change that you're proposing has a higher likelihood of quickly assimilating into who that person is, what they want, how they already are or want to operate from and in. It's just another way of maximizing the opportunity. So number 4, emotional safety, right? This really comes down to regulating your presence, your calm tone, your slower breath, your open body language. All of these cues communicate to the nervous system of the other person, right? Via energy, via their own observation of your body, that it's okay to relax. That even though we're talking about very tense topics, that it's okay to do so, right? And for you as the coach or the leader or the manager to be able to hold that, they can borrow it when they need it. And that conversation can feel emotionally rich, but them not go off the rails. right? Corey Muscara, who is a previous monk turned, I believe his name is, or what he does is he's a coach of sorts, but talks about stillness a lot. And I really like some of the things that he has to say. He says, your nervous system is the intervention, right? People take cues from your eyes, from your breath, from your tone of voice, and that gives them a model to follow, right? And so if we can regulate our presence through our own breath, through our own self-talk, then we have a better chance of managing the collateral damage that could potentially come from a hard conversation. Some other things that I think can help with this emotional safety is validating without agreeing, right? People want to feel heard. They want to feel understood and acknowledged before opening up to new things. So you as the coach or the leader, taking the time to really hear what they're saying, not just waiting for yourself to respond, which people think is listening, it's not. Take the time to hear what they're actually saying and to repeat back if needed to confirm that you understand. This is so simple and so overlooked. Just because you're validating someone and how they're feeling doesn't mean that you're agreeing with them. It's just signaling to them, hey, I'm here and this is what I'm hearing. Is that right? This makes people feel so much more comfortable in a hard conversation because they know that you understand their reality. So there's higher likelihood of them wanting to listen, right? So many examples of me trying to communicate an idea to somebody and it's not working. And one of the biggest reasons why it wasn't is because the other person did not feel that I understood them to the point where my suggestion related to their experience. And it wasn't until I repeated back to the individual what I thought they said or what I believe they're saying and got their confirmation that then opened the doors to the same strategy. But now because that connection was made through understanding, they're like, oh, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, thank you for that. And it's just mind-blowing to me. I've caught myself in so many of these situations of like, man, the simplicity of that. And you can summarize what someone's saying in less than 15 to 20 seconds. Because, I mean, very rarely are people ramble. I guess I shouldn't say very rarely. I'm sure it happens quite a deal. But before you have a chance to speak, there's probably, anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes. And if you're truly listening, you can really understand the storyline of what someone's saying and anchor it into something that you can kind of understand and then simulate that into a 20 to 30 second response to confirm, right? And that emotional safety that then comes from the acknowledgement of what they're saying and saying, hey, I understand. This is what you mean, right? Cool. And because you said that, here's what I think would be best. It's creating a bridge rather than a silo, right? So emotional safety, huge. And doing your part to prep for that conversation so that you maintain that level of calmness in the chaos, which is not always easy. And you will make mistakes here and there, but we're human and we rally and we can apologize and we can move forward and continue to refine. Number 5, sit in the pain. So sometimes, maybe most times, breakthroughs require healthy friction. And pain is what moves people. I wish it were the other way around, but from the research that I've seen and the conversations that I've had with very high-level psychologists and professionals in the mental psychological realm, pain is it. Right? And so we don't change until there's enough pain to do so. So by asking in a breakthrough conversation, what's the risk of staying the same? What's the cost of not changing? When we ask that question and we don't run from it, we hold the mirror to the person and even to ourselves at times, then we can't wiggle out of it. Right? It's the truth is staring at you right in the face. And it's almost like we have to accept this truth that if we don't change, you're going to continue to be overweight, depressed, your marriage is going to fall apart, your business is going to crumble, your fill in the blank. They got to know that. And sometimes I think people want it to feel very positive because they're personally not comfortable with pain, so that they take that pain away from the other person. But one of the greatest gifts that we can do for others, I believe, is to sit in the pain with someone. Not because you love watching them squirm in the pain, but you understand that the squirming in the pain is the gift to a new version of them. That is the necessary requirement. That's the pruning away of what doesn't matter. That's the sobering effect of what they have been neglecting or what they have not yet seen, that now that they've seen it is creating a sense of frustration that then can be channeled into moving in a direction, right? But if they don't feel that, then what's the point of changing? People get so attached to how they currently operate, how they've lived, that change is hard. And it requires a lot of effort. But that effort is worth it when they know what they're going to continue to experience in pain, and maybe even more pain if they don't change. Right? So someone may be super attached to a mindset that is disabling and toxic and whatnot. And your job as the coach and the facilitator is help them to see what that mindset or what that behavior is causing, to the point where they are like, oh, yeah, I didn't see it like that. But damn, now that you say that, that is kind of bad. Yeah. And then they're like, okay, so what do we do, right? That right there is a clear opening of like, great, now let's get concrete. Now let's move into what the next steps look like. But we can't get there until that pain is acknowledged. Some people get there quicker. Some people need more time. You know, sometimes it can vary on the skill of the communicator, but the pain nonetheless. Number 6, maybe one of my favorites, is silence. Silence is not emptiness. It's a container. First, it surfaces discomfort, then emotion, then truth. And most people are surprised at what they end up saying after about 10 to 20 seconds of stillness, of quiet. And people hate quiet. They'd rather fill the space, right, with nervous laughter, shifting in their chair, repeating the same point. Oftentimes, these are defense mechanisms against vulnerability. But it's in the vulnerability where we get the truth, we get the rawness, we get the realness that people crave but are afraid to go to because of fear of abandonment or fear of people seeing who they really are as opposed to what they think they should be, right? And that this discomfort is actually a signal that you're on the edge of something meaningful. Like that inner war that's happening is actually a good thing, because what comes after that is the clarity, and that clarity is what moves you in a different direction. Right? So asking a powerful question as a facilitator, a coach, or a manager, and then let the silence do the heavy lifting. That pause forces reflection, and it invites depth. And once the noise settles and the emotions that were hidden under, quick responses, the truth starts to show. Right? And then you might notice that people breathe different. They slow down. They may soften their tone. Tears start to come up. Frustration. And that relief can emerge. That silence gives permission for feelings to catch up with their words. So they move from, automatic answers, what they should say, to what's really true for them. And that's what we're after. Until we get there, we're just it's just a prescription that someone else says I should do, as opposed to this is what I know I should do and want to do. Right? And so, some are going to rush to fill the silence because they're uncomfortable with it, and that's fine. Some others will lean back, and you just got to be noticing of these things and not be afraid to sit there in that silence calmly and say, hey, with your, not necessarily with your words, but with your vibe, that you don't need to perform here. Okay, I'm not looking for the right answer. I'm looking for the truest answer. So take your time and then sit there with them with that. This builds trust, and people learn that they can bring their real thoughts without being cut off or judged. Because if people think that you can't handle the truth, they'll stop telling you the truth. And that causes even more distortion, right? And so oftentimes in my trainings with athletes, and I mean any training really, but with sports teams specifically, because I'm in the sports season of my business, I'll wait sometimes upwards of a minute before someone caves and folds, and then the real conversation starts. Like I'll ask a hard question, or even not even a hard question, a vulnerable question. And I'll look around the room, and everyone's making eye contact with each other, and everyone's like looking down, looking up. If they see me looking at them, they'll look away. And I'll wait for about 15 to 18 seconds, which is like an eternity. And then I'll go, guys, I'm totally fine sitting in silence. So one of the things that you'll find very quickly is that I'm not just going to rush into the next thing. Like the whole point of us is to work together and to collaborate. And if that means we got to sit here for 30 minutes in silence, cool. And then I'll just sit there. And usually shortly after that, maybe 25 seconds in, 30 seconds in, someone will be like, raise their hand. And that will open the door to vulnerability. That one brave person that I'll then say, hey, great job. I know this is hard, but the fact that you're the first person to do that, thank you for that. So I'll reward the behavior immediately so I can get more of that in the future. That which you reward gets repeated, right? So I'm acknowledging that. And then that's when the real conversation starts. Other than that, it's just theory. It's just me talking to just kind of blanket minds until people have some skin in the game. And that usually is some sort of vulnerability, some sort of honest, truthful share that brings the depth, right? Steve Jobs was asked one time in a workshop setting where someone asked, what was one of the biggest lessons that you learned while you were at Apple that you brought to Next? Steve was like, yeah, that's a good question. And then he sat there for literally 18 seconds, just thinking. And you could see him thinking. And the fact that you could see him thinking made you want to know the answer even more, right? And then he said the answer, and the whole room was engaged. And so what we've been talking up until now with this silence is more so how you can utilize silence for the other person to share, but it also can work for you. If someone asks you a question in this hard conversation setting that we're kind of working from, or any other time, you also don't have to rush into that answer. Like it symbolizes confidence that you have the courage and the thoughtfulness to want to not rush into an answer, but give a real answer. So that's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. Right? And then say it. So it can go both ways. And lastly on this, Alex Hormozi, who many of you probably know if you follow this podcast, business individual, very helpful, useful content that he's created, kind of been blowing up the last 3-5 years, and just set a world record for, I think, book sales, which is really, really cool. He says that 8 seconds after asking for the sale, if you wait 8 seconds, it dramatically increases your closing percentage. So what I'm hearing, Jane, is that you wanted, this problem is this, and then, you want to have that solution. Okay, great. Here's what I suggest. So I think we should do this, this, and this, and that'll cost you about X, Y, and Z. So how would you like to move forward with that? 6, 7, 8. Okay, yeah, let's do this. So like silence is such a powerful revealer. So learning to utilize it more is only going to help you and whoever else you sit in that silence with. Okay, lastly, connecting insight to story. So this can go a few ways. Anytime someone uses a story, the content automatically has more relatability, because anytime we tell a story, the person who's hearing our story is going to relate to our story in the way, in the closest way that they can through their own experience. So if I share a story about me standing up in third grade in front of a class and sharing something that I thought was cool, but everybody laughed at me, and then that was a big reason why I hate talking in public, someone or most people out there are going to find an embarrassing moment that they've also gone. Maybe it was in third grade, maybe it was in sixth grade, maybe it was at work, but they're going to find something similar that they can reference in their mind to understand my story. This happens regardless. Like, this is just how we're wired. We learn best through story. So anytime you as the facilitator, the coach, can tie an insight or a lesson to a story, you dramatically increase the likelihood of them receiving that insight or that lesson in that moment, right? So for me, I'll give you a few examples. So I remember reading a quote from Aristotle that said, "Give me a child until he is 7 and I will show you the man." And this is correlating with the science that the brain kind of, has not full maturity, but is mostly together and formed by the age 7 or 8, which means what happens all the way up until then is a heavy, heavy influence on who the individual will become through their life. Now, having kids, I use that 7, 8-year marker as a way to, okay, what lessons do I want my sons to operate from the rest of their life, and how can I fit that into lessons, into questions, into experiences that drill that into who they are, right? And so a question that I often ask, I'm talking at least 3 times a month, is what does it mean to be a Silvis? And we've narrowed it down to 3 things. Sometimes it flexes to 5, but Silvises are kind, they are hardworking, and they never give up. Those 3 things. And my kids know that, 5 and 2.5. They can repeat it every time I ask. And so I'm driving down the street with both my kids, and I'm playing Puppy Dog Pals soundtrack. Banger. And one of the songs is called Keep On Trying. And the whole song is obviously about, when things get hard, you just keep on trying. And my oldest son, he goes, "Daddy, this is a Silvis song." And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, the song talks about keep on trying and to never give up, and Silvises never give up." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." Hit to the heart. Ooh, father win, right? Like, it felt so good to hear that and know that what I'm saying and what I'm embodying and what I'm sharing is landing and being integrated. And so, I share that as like an opportunity for us to be even more intentional with our children, with our teams, with whoever we're interacting with, like asking them those types of questions regularly, keep things top of mind, right? And also primes us to pay attention to the behavior that aligns with whatever it is that we're wanting them to embody. And so in this example, me sharing that story can, bring up opportunities or space for you to potentially integrate that into your life. So having a database of stories that you can pull from your own life, stories that you've heard from others, examples that have really stood out to you, all of these can become tools inside of a conversation to drill home something that you want people to remember or at least consider moving forward. The second part of this is that everything we do comes from a story. Who we believe we are, what we believe is possible, what we believe about other people. There's a narrative going on, right? And there's something called narrative-based therapy where the whole point is to work from the narratives that people create about whatever they're coming to therapy for. And so a cool other exercise that you can do with somebody is have them tell you their story in maybe an abbreviated format, or their story around what they're thinking with a certain situation that you're trying to reference. Tell me the story that's happening when you and Sally had that conversation. And by them becoming more meta of their experience and zooming out enough to then summarize what they were thinking about that situation, you now have an inside look into the story that they were operating from. And now that they've identified the story through telling it, and now you understand the story by them sharing it, you can then shift the story into a more empowering story, so that the next time a similar situation happens with Sally or anyone else, the new story can emerge more so than the older story. But it is a story nonetheless, right? And so to not shy away from it, to leverage the impact that stories can have, both from an internal perspective, us creating a story around the world, or a more external experience where we're sharing stories to drill home lessons. Either way, these can become very helpful tools to use to create breakthrough moments. Okay. Last thing that I'll say, summarizing all these 7, is that, again, they're not sequential. You can use these as needed. Some you may deeply resonate with, others you don't. Cool. This is more so pull what you got from this and integrate it. That's the most important part. And anytime you're having a breakthrough conversation, the most important thing after you're done, like you're summarizing, you're closing it, what is the one thing, at least one thing, what's one thing that we can walk away from this conversation with doing that's measurable, that we're able to see progress of, that gives people purpose and direction and something to do, right? Because it may be a heavy psychological reframing, which is always helpful, and then anchor it to, now here's what we're going to do. Something simple, not complex, that measurable, and signals to you that progress is being made. If we do all those things, we have the highest likelihood of creating a really memorable conversation that people can walk away changed from, and also feel good about it. Like it was a collaborative thing, not a dictator, you do it this way because I know best type vibe. So I hope this was helpful. Send this episode to anyone that you feel could benefit from some or all of these strategies and these tools. And if you want to hear more episodes like this, please shoot me a DM. Let me know. I have 10 decades, decade plus of just real life examples and tools that have helped me be a better communicator and serve and learn and grow. And so if this episode really resonated with you, please let me know and I can create more content like this. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. Go out there being your own 1%. Until next time, much love.